Welcome to this video lecture series. I am Amiya Kumar. I teach in the Department of Sociology at Tezpur University. Especially this lecture series will be helpful to the students, those who have enrolled in the open and distance learning mode. This might be useful for the aspirants, those who are preparing for various kind of competitive examinations. Today, in this series, we are going to discuss various approaches to development. Mostly, three approaches which are important and significant to understand the concept and process of development. These are liberal approach, Marxist approach, and ecological approach. So today, in this session, we will discuss these three approaches to understand development. Perspective on development, which we look from the liberal perspective. We all know that liberalism is used mostly as a political philosophy. Later, it influenced both the field of economy and development. Literally, the term liberal implies open-minded, broad-minded, free-thinking, moderate, tolerant, and generous. If you look at all these words, it somehow implies to liberal. In this sense, then liberalism could be seen more like a supporter of the market and unregulated mechanisms of the market. In the Enlightenment period, the Enlightenment is used to refer to a period in European history when the civilization was going through a radical change. The Enlightenment movement emphasizes on human reason to counter ignorance, superstition, tyranny in creating a better world. We all know when a journal posed a question, what is an enlightenment? The great philosopher Immanuel Kant answered to that question by writing one essay. That essay, What is an Enlightenment, became very popular, and till now it is very popular, and till now it is used as one of the most important texts in the context of philosophy, sociology, cultural studies, literature, and even in the development studies. So earlier, if we look at people, they were dependent on various kinds of religious institutions. These religious institutions, the priest and others, those who were in the charge of these religious institutions, they were trying to control the humans during that time. They were totally dependent on the religious institutions to guide them, to govern them. But during this period of Enlightenment movement, which is considered as a movement of creating reason, rationality, freedom, this movement challenged the idea of this dependence on the religious institutions. And Immanuel Kant wrote that to come out of the darkness, to cast off the shell of immaturity is called Enlightenment. So, during this movement, there are various philosophers, and after that also various thinkers and philosophers, they contributed immensely to the understanding of society, individual, human being, the material world, the relationship between various individuals, the relationship between the world and the environment, the relationship between human being with other creatures, everything that were discussed during that period. So, there were philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, who argued that rational self-interestedness, Thomas Hobbes argued that rational self-interestedness, that is selfishness, legitimated philosophically as the morality of the new capitalist system. In the similar context, John Locke believed that God originally gave the earth and its products to all people in common, and human individuals had the right to preserve their own lives through subsistence such as food, drink derived from the earth. Scottish philosopher David Hume believed that human beings are driven by consumerism and they have the greed to acquire things. Human beings strike a balance between society and consumption. So these three thinkers, they tried to look at the context and propose something which the human being are in the center stage, which they are driven by certain kind of interest, and that they have to go after their own interest and pursue their interest. Adam Smith is regarded as the father of classical economics. The book he wrote, which became very popular, titled The Wealth of the Nations, and John Stuart Mill's Principles of Political Economy created a wave in Europe. Adam Smith also tried to explore the human selfishness and tried to link this with the rise of market growth and capitalism. Adam Smith advocated a concept model called laissez-faire model, where he argued that the market should not be controlled by anybody. Specifically, it should not be controlled by the state. The wealth created by the market through various kind of transaction and business, it will percolate down to the below, and thereby the poor people can take benefit of the transactions. And it is also, he says that the market and this procedure, this mechanism will work as a kind of invisible hand, which will help the both market and the state in a very interesting manner, and thereby it will help the growth of the society. David Ricardo opined that trade and the extension of market in other parts increased the rate of profit in a country. This resulted in a more productive and efficient division of labor in the international market. J.S. Mill, through his work on liberty, advocated for liberty and freedom of the citizens and stated that the state should protect its citizens from any kind of harm. So, in a way, we now understand how and what is liberal approach to development. Mostly, the liberal approach of development talks about the liberty, the freedom, which is, as we all know, it is the concept, and this approach is mostly a kind of political philosophy where each and every individual has the right to freedom, liberty, free thinking, and one can pursue his or her own interest. In this model, it is also proposed that to achieve real development, that state has to be only a kind of, state should work as a facilitator rather than creating obstacle or creating some kind of regulation and restriction for the market to grow. Both Adam Smith, David Ricardo and other, they promote this free trade, capitalism, the growth of market, and suggest that to have a wealthy society, one need to give free hand to the market. So later on, neoliberalism also take this position and they promote the supremacy of the market, and they advocate that the market should be given ultimate and total freedom so that it can grow, thereby the society can also be wealthy. Now, with this approach, let us come to the Marxist approach to development. As we understand, Karl Marx was an advocate of social change and through the equal distribution. Through what kind of distribution? That people should not be exploited on the basis of their class position. A labor should not be exploited as by their owner, and the owner, they exploit the labor class through various kind of mechanism. So what is Marxist approach to development? As in this session, only we look into it that what are the concepts and theory Marx has proposed to understand the whole idea of development. Karl Marx's analysis and methods to understand social change and development are known as historical materialism or dialectical materialism. He tried to understand the society from the material perspective. For Marx, the transformative movement differentiating human distinctively from natural history came when human beings put consciousness and deliberation into effect as they worked to reproduce them. For Marx, as we have discussed, the social relations that combined labor with means of production determined the quality and quantity of productive development. For him, a second transformative historical movement, the first being intentionality in the production, came when the means of production came to be controlled by a ruling elite. Capitalists put accumulated capital into use by employing additional wage workers to produce profit. For Marx, development was a process of capital accumulation occurring unevenly in terms of class, the owning class becoming richer, and space, some countries becoming richer than others. Development was an utterly contradictory and violent process, essentially because of the contradictory nature of its defining social relations, that is, exploitation and competition. So, what we have seen here through these points, that Marx is essentially talking and analyzing development as a contradictory terms in itself. If you look at the Marx methodology, that the method of dialectic, then we can see that they go through the argument, the process, the method encourages us to look into a particular argument or process so that we can reach or we can find a position where the original statement would contradict the statement or the process, then we can create another position. What he calls in his method is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So for him, it is contradictory in nature because of it creates a kind of difference, gap between the different class of people. And also it creates violence because exploiting people in terms of their basic needs, when they work hard, they toil hard, they labor hard, but they don't get the basic amenities and facilities in their life to have a comfortable living, then it is problematic according to him. He essentially says that the modern development, which is based on capitalism, is essentially exploitative in nature, and it is a contradictory thing that instead of development, people are exploited. Then comes the liberal, then comes the ecological approach to development. What is ecological approach to development? As we know that there are various thinkers, including Marxist thinkers like John Bellamy Foster and others, like ecological Marxist, they have looked at the whole idea of capitalism as a kind of exploitative mechanism to exploit the nature and environment. So since then, we have seen varied, like a variety and different kinds of thinkers and sociologists, those who have worked towards challenging the process of development on the basis of exploitation. In ecological approach to development, there are various thinkers. Mostly in the Indian context, we can take M.K. Gandhi as a thinker who advocated and argued against this capitalism. He emphasized on the village level development, village Swaraj, to have a kind of meaningful development. Similarly, if we look at E.F. Schumacher, his seminal work on The Small is Beautiful, where he was influenced by the Gandhian thought, and Arne Naess's idea about the deep ecology. He was also influenced by Gandhi, that we should not think that only humans we have right to live on this earth. There are other creatures who we should give equal respect, and they have also equal right to live in. We have seen that we have various kind of threat that is coming to our world, like in terms of climate change, in terms of global warming. So here this ecological approach to development is very crucial to understand all these dynamics. Caroline Marchant shows the Western scientific fraternity initiated the process to have control over the nature and society through rationality. The machine metaphor became more real to control nature for human development. Francis Bacon, René Descartes, Isaac Newton, along with the Enlightenment philosophy and the scientific revolution, presents the mechanistic worldview of science and the modern world. As I have already mentioned, deep ecology, it is materiality and consumerism are discouraged in this approach. To understand this, we have to also discuss ecofeminism. Ecofeminism was coined by the writer Francois de Ubonne in 1974. Ecofeminism could be defined as a value system or social movement that explores the connection between patriarchal structure and environmental destruction. Ecofeminism advocates that all living beings are equally important and have their own worth. So, ecofeminism emphasizes that this, in the Indian context, that Dalits, Adivasis, peasants, and the marginalized section of the society, they care for the earth. And philosophers like Anthony Giddens and Ulrich Beck, they have emphasized on the risk society. They argue that there are consequences of modernity, and because of too much of exploitation, too much of greed, we have exploited the nature. Even though we have advanced a lot through the help of technology, there are consequences which creates threats to our life, to our planet, to our globe. So these threats, they have conceptualized in the idea of risk society. So they have called for a kind of reflexive modernization, reflexivity through which we need to understand which is good and bad, and to create a sustained life which will be useful for everybody. So in this session, we have understood what are the approaches that is there to understand, important approaches to understand the sociology of development from the sociological perspective, that is liberal approach, Marxist approach, and ecological approach. And there are many texts and readings. You may consult those readings further to understand better on these particular topics that we have discussed today. Thank you.